And welcome back to Comment Commentary, the show where I look at comments and provide commentary. I'm Hardleg Joe, if any you didn't know, joined over here by Twitch chat, just chatting it up. And today's comment comes from Isabella Zephyr, who responded on a previous episode, I don't know which one, and it's not really important because they weren't responding to anything in that episode. It's kind of a standalone comment. And to be honest, it's a little rambly, so I'm not going to read all of it. I mean, you can pause the video if you want to check it out yourself. But the crux of what they're asking is, how do we deal with right-wing propaganda? Specifically, the stuff aimed at young men. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that particular brand of content, it's themed around this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, it teaches guys to be strong, independent, and confident. Which doesn't seem like a bad thing on the face of it. It doesn't seem like propaganda. Doesn't even seem like it could possibly be political. Until you look at what they actually recommend. Because a lot of their advice boils down to looking at guys and being like, okay, if you want to improve your station in life, what you gotta do is make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, and as ruthlessly as possible. You know, it's very capitalism coded in all the wrong kinds of ways. It teaches guys to look at the world like a CEO. You know, everyone out there is either a weaker person that you've got to dominate, that you've got to get to work for you, a customer that you've got to milk money from, like an idiot to be exploited so you can get more cash, or they're a fellow CEO, you know, another alpha, which means they're your competition who has to be destroyed through any means necessary. You know, there are no friends in capitalism. There are only customers, competitors, and workers. And I think you can already kind of see how maybe having that outlook might not be good on a personal level, but where it becomes political is when you have a million people all sort of using this philosophy at the same time, all sort of looking at the world through this same perspective. Because what is politics at the end of the day? It's a bunch of people in a society getting together and mutually agreeing on the rules for that society. And if you get a bunch of people together and they're all side-eyeing each other like, okay, that guy's a weakling, I can get him to do my bidding. That person I need to take out through any means necessary. That person's an idiot, I could probably trick them into doing what I want. You're not going to be able to collaborate, you're not going to be able to compromise, you're not going to be able to agree on anything. Because you're only looking out for yourself. You have no interest in the society, it's very individualistic. And in that way, it's very anti-democracy. It's very anti-union. You know, there's an old saying when it comes to unions. Divided we beg, united we bargain. And a lot of this right-wing propaganda is stuff that looks at guys and says, beg? Bargain? No, no, no. You are a strong alpha male. You can demand what you want, and the people at the top will have no recourse but to listen to you, as long as you're strong enough, as long as you're independent enough, as long as you don't team up with the people around you. Just whatever you do, don't organize, don't talk with your fellow workers, don't get those other strong guys to be on your side. And if you're wondering why they don't want you to do that, all you have to do is look at who funds a lot of these right-wing grifters. Almost all of them get their money from billionaires and multimillionaires who already have all their power and are trying to divide and conquer. They're trying to get people on this individualistic track so that they don't organize, so that they don't group up, because individually you stand no chance against like a billionaire. So all of that brings us back to the main question asked by this comment, which is, how do we tackle the issue of essentially teaching empathy? How do we instill critical thinking into young guys so that they can see through this self-interested grift, see how it's bad for them? So this is a very good question about a serious problem that affects all of society, which means that there's not a single answer that's going to work. Like a lot of these complex problems, you need a diversity of tactics. It's like I often say, if you got a problem, you gotta look at it from every direction, push on it from different sides until you find one that gets you some progress. And I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers. That's why you got to go watch other videos, read books, try to see what all the possible different tactics there are. Now that being said, there is one tactic that I don't see used very often, and I think it could have a lot of impact. I think it could be very effective. It's the one that I use in a lot of my videos, because it's the one that, like, when I was a young guy, this is what stuck with me. And it's basically looking at empathy not as some internal emotion that you just feel, but as a philosophy that you practice to better yourself. And it's one of the problems I have with a lot of left-leaning people, and especially liberal people, is that they look at everything from very emotional terms. Like, a lot of them just naturally have empathy for other people, and when they see someone else being selfish or greedy, their response is to get, like, angry. Their response is to try to shame that person, to try to make them feel bad, so that they do the right thing. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend like that never works. There's certainly a lot of people who can be shamed into doing the right thing. But when it comes to me personally, if someone comes at me with, like, an aggressive attack, I'm just going to avoid that person. Like, I'm not going to listen to what they're saying. I'm just going to be like, oh, you're angry, you're shouting, I don't want to have to deal with that, get away from me. So I think the better tactic is to look at this logically and to put it in a frame of reference that they can understand. Like, if they are a selfish person who only cares about themselves, empathy is still the most effective strategy for survival. And it doesn't take, like, a whole bunch of complex arguments to figure that out, you know. Just think about, is your life easier if you have a bunch of enemies or a bunch of allies? If you're going about your life, do you want to be looking over your shoulder, sleeping with a gun under your pillow, hiring security, always on the lookout for the people who are trying to sabotage you and hurt you? Or is it a lot easier if you've got friends who have your back? Like, clearly, life is a lot easier when you have allies than if you have enemies. And the easiest way to make allies is to just practice some empathy. Now I'm gonna go a little farther than I usually do. Give a little example, a little scenario for you. And let's go ahead and turn off this comment too, so you can just enjoy the beach flavor behind here. Okay, so let's pretend you're working a job, an overnight shift with two other people. Let's call them Tony and Ben. And the three of you kind of do your own thing. You know, you're just kind of focused on your own work. You say hello, but you don't really interact all that much. And then one day, a couple months after you start working, you come in, and Tony obviously feels like shit. You know, he is angry, or he's sad, depressed maybe. Either way, he's not doing well, and it's affecting his work. He's not getting much done, and as a result, you have to do a whole bunch of extra work. Now there's basically three different ways that you can deal with this situation, right? Like, the first is you can go up and kick Tony while he's down. You can be a dick to Tony. Be like, hey man, what the fuck? I gotta pick up your work. Could you pick up the slack? Get over it. I don't care what you're dealing with. Get your work done, you know? You're making stuff hard on me. And maybe that'll work. Maybe that'll get Tony to do his work. But he'll remember that. He'll remember that when he was feeling down, when he was at his worst, you kicked him rather than helped him. And you have to work with Tony from now on. So any chance he gets, anytime you slip up ever, he is going to be there to pounce to do the same thing to you. To never give you a moment's rest because you didn't give him a moment's rest. You've essentially created an enemy. You know, he's not a villain, he's not going to kill you or anything, but that is only going to make your life harder from this point forward. So the second option, instead of that, is you could just ignore Tony. Just be like, oh, whatever, he's dealing with that, that's his problem, I'm going to focus on my problems, I'll get my work done. And you know, that's certainly better than being an asshole about it, but at best, you're in the same position you were before. Most likely though, things are still going to get worse. Because you didn't do anything to solve the problem. Maybe Tony comes in tomorrow and he's better. Maybe he's not. And if he's not, you're going to have to keep dealing with this problem over and over again. And even if he is better, he's still going to remember that when he was down, when he was obviously feeling bad, you did nothing to help him. Which means you still might have made yourself an enemy, maybe a lesser enemy, but you're not doing yourself any favors. The best, most logical option in this instance is to go over and be like, hey man, are you okay? Is there something I can do to help? Like, do you need the day off? Do you need to take a break? Offer whatever you can to try to make Tony's life a little easier. It doesn't matter if you actually like Tony, if you actually care about him. You're not practicing empathy out of the kindness of your heart. You're practicing empathy because it's good for you. Because Tony will remember that. And then the next time he comes in, he's going to treat you better. He's going to be nicer to you. If you're having a bad day, he's going to come over and be like, hey, obviously you're having a bad day. I owe you from last time. Being kind to others is an effective treatment to make your life better. And that is why you need to have empathy rather than practice aggression towards people. And the best thing about this is that even though it works as like a personal philosophy, it doesn't take a whole lot to see how this extrapolates into like a societal-wide thing. Because remember, you're working with two people, not just Tony, but also Ben. Ben sees you being nice to Tony. And not only does that make Ben like you a little bit more, think, hey, you know, that guy's not half bad. But that also means that next time you come in, maybe Tony's feeling bad and you're like, I can't deal with this again. Ben might come over because he knows this is how we get things done on night shift. We take care of each other. If Tony's not feeling good, one of us will step up to help. And that's how you build a community. That's how you make allies. So you can see how this works with coworkers in a job where you're all stuck together. Well, what is a country? What is a society? It's a bunch of people stuck together. Your neighbors, the people around you, they're your coworkers too. And you need to take care of them with the same degree. And if you do, if you help spread that sense of comradeship, of community, if you foster an environment where everyone's helping out with each other, then you slowly improve society. You make it better. And I know some of you, especially if you're thinking more selfishly, you're like, why do I care about society? Why should I want to improve the world? Because you live in the world. Like, it always baffles me when people are like, why should I care about the environment? Because you live in it, asshole. If you improve the world, that includes you. Your life will get better if you improve everything around you. And the same thing, you know, some men just want to watch the world burn, and some stupid men don't seem to realize that if they burn down the world while they're in it, they will also go up in flames. And so I really think that's the easiest way that you can push this. Like, everyone improves if you lift up the bottom layer of society. You know, a rising tide lifts all ships. So whether you're talking to people regularly, or you're making content like me, or posting on social media, whatever tactics you're using to try to get through to people about this, consider using this tactic. Consider reframing it. And you can do this with a whole lot of different problems. You know, whether it comes to homelessness, what's the most effective solution to homelessness? Give people homes. Or here's one more example. I know I've already gone a little long, but think about the student loan debate, right? There's a whole lot of talk about giving people forgiveness for the loans they took out in college, because a lot of those loans were really predatory. A lot of these people were like 17 or 18. You know, they weren't old enough to drink, but they were old enough to take out a loan that would take 50 years to pay off. I personally did not go to very much college. I did not take out a loan. I didn't think it was a good idea. And clearly that paid off, because I have a job that didn't require me to do that, and I didn't have a whole lot of debt like a lot of my friends do. But when you ask me whether or not student loans should be forgiven, I am absolutely for that. Because I'm practicing empathy towards the other people in my society. I see them burdened with debt, and I'm like, well, clearly they're miserable, which means they're not working very hard, which means they're going to make everyone around them miserable. So it is to my benefit to try to make them happier. And if I could do that by getting a politician to make a line on a law, then we should absolutely do that. And, even to a lesser degree, a lot of people will ask me, like, why do you care about other people's student debt? Well, you see, I make a lot of my money on Patreon. I get my money because fans of the channel donate. And you would not believe how many comments I get from people who are like, Joe, I love your content, I love everything you do, you're great, I wish I could support you, but I'm in too much debt right now to afford to do that. So in the most cynical way possible, getting those people out of debt will likely mean that I see more people on my Patreon. And that kind of goes to any kind of business. No matter what kind of business you're doing, if people have more money to spend, they're more likely to spend it on you and the things you do and the things you make. Any kind of business benefits from having people out of debt. Unless you're a debt collector. I guess if you're a debt collector and certain kind of bankers, they thrive by having people in debt. But those people are parasites, and I don't care about their feelings. It's like they say, moderation in all things. I have empathy for a lot of people, not for debt collectors. Get a new job. Do something else with your time. But anyway, I think I've rambled on enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. This is still a small channel, still trying to get more support. If you think someone who would find this interesting, consider sharing it around, posting it on like Blue Sky or wherever else social media still exists, where people might be interested on this. And of course, if you've got comments of your own, that some questions that you'd like to hear my thoughts on, leave them down in the comments, and maybe you can be on the next episode of Comment Commentary. Until then, good luck, and stay safe out there.